Have you ever wondered how people slept? In a world before electricity, before alarm clocks, before the glow of screens filled the night? Imagine a time when sleep came in two parts, when midnight was not for tossing and turning, but for quiet prayers, hushed conversations, or simply sitting in stillness. Tonight, we'll drift back to the medieval world, not to the castles or battles, but to the quiet hearths, straw-filled mattresses, and forgotten rituals of rest. This is the story of unusual sleep habits in medieval times, a calm, curious wander through the sleepy corners of history. So close your eyes, let your thoughts slow, and follow me softly into the night. In the heart of the medieval countryside, evening arrived slowly. There were no clocks to chase, no bright lamps to chase away the dark, only the slow dimming of the sky and the hush of the village settling in. Chickens rustled into their coops, the cows gave a final, drowsy low, and the last glow of the sun stretched across the wooden shutters of low cottages. Inside, the fire crackled softly, a steady, breathing sound, the center of the home's warmth and light. Families gathered near it, not for entertainment, but for comfort. Maybe to share a crust of bread, to mumble a prayer, or to simply sit in silence after the long day's labor. Beds were often nothing more than straw mats, laid directly on the hard-packed floor. The straw was changed when it began to itch too much, or when the lice grew too bold. But sleep came all the same. Wrapped in rough wool, under low ceilings and cold stone walls, they slipped into slumber with the rhythm of nature. And unlike us, they did not expect to sleep through the night in one long stretch. Instead, the night was broken into two peaceful halves. They called it first sleep, a deep, heavy rest that began not long after sunset. When the world was quiet, and the embers of the hearth glowed softly in the dark, people would lie down and drift into the first stretch of dreams. It lasted for several hours, long enough for the body to sink into rest, but not the whole night through. Then, slowly, they would wake. Not with a start, but with a gentle rising. The house was still dim, the fire low, the night silent, but alive with small sounds. The wind against the shutters, the shifting of a sleeping dog, the far-off hoot of an owl. This period of wakefulness between first and second sleep was a time of quiet contemplation. People might whisper prayers, stoke the fire, or talk softly with whoever shared their bed. Some would mend clothes, read scripture by candlelight, or sit alone and think. It was known as the watch, not something to be avoided, but a peaceful pause in the middle of the night. A natural part of the rhythm of sleep, shaped by centuries of life lived in tune with the dark. Eventually, the second sleep would come, just as softly as the first. People would return to bed, wrap themselves tightly against the chill, and drift once more into dreams. This sleep carried them through to morning, to the first light creeping through the cracks in the wall, to the rooster's call and the stirring of coals for breakfast. In grander homes, things looked a little different. The wealthy slept on raised wooden beds, padded with down feathers or straw wrapped in linen. Thick curtains hung from the posts, not just to show status, but to keep out the cold and give a rare sense of privacy. Servants slept nearby, often on the floor or on benches, children curled up together under heavy woolen blankets. In winter, it was not uncommon for everyone in the house to sleep close, bundled together for warmth. And yet, even in castles, sleep was not without interruption. Guards paced the halls, bells from distant churches told the passing of hours, dogs barked in the courtyard. Still, the quiet rhythm of two sleeps remained. For monks and nuns in monasteries, the night was governed by the strict toll of devotion. Their sleep was broken not only by custom, but by duty. They would rise in the early hours to chant prayers in cold stone chapels, their breath visible in the air, robes heavy and damp with dew. Their rest was brief, their minds disciplined, trained to find peace in those precious hours between services. For them, sleep was sacred, but so was wakefulness. The stillness of the midnight watch was a time to draw closer to the divine. In rural cottages, where families lived by the rhythm of the land, bedtime was simpler. As the sun set, oil lamps or tallow candles gave a final hour of light. Then, with the house darkened, people lay down wherever they could, often side by side, sometimes on the same bed, and often near the hearth. Pillows, if they had any, were stuffed with straw or rags. Sheets were rare. Many slept in their clothes, and in the coldest months, they would pile on furs, cloaks, anything that might keep the biting wind at bay. Sleep came easily after long days of labor. There was no need to count hours or worry about rest. Fatigue did the work of lullabies. The body knew when to lie down, and the night was long enough to stretch out sleep in two slow, peaceful parts. There were superstitions too. Some believed that dreams during the first sleep were different from those in the second. The early dreams were thought to be mundane, the mind still tangled in the day's work. But those that came after the watch, in the second sleep, were more meaningful, closer to the spirit world, more vivid, more mysterious. Midnight was a liminal time, a quiet hour when people felt closer to the unknown, when herbalists whispered their charms and stories were told in murmurs by firelight. Some believed the soul wandered during sleep, slipping into other realms, and the break between sleeps was when it returned home. Sleep was not just a necessity, but something woven into their way of life. A time of rest, yes, but also a space for thought, for connection, for dreaming with open eyes. In towns and cities, the nights were not quite so still. Noise drifted in from the streets, the calls of night watchmen, the sounds of drunken songs from nearby inns, the soft clatter of hooves as carts moved under moonlight. Yet even there, the pattern held. People slept in segments. Bakers rose after first sleep to begin kneading their dough. Midwives kept watch through the night, waiting for calls. Lamplighters moved through alleyways, checking flames and trimming wicks. And always, somewhere, someone stirred during the watch. Not everyone had a bed. The poor might sleep on benches, wrapped in cloaks, or huddled near stables. Travelers in inns often shared a mattress with strangers, men and women lying side by side, heads turned politely away, each seeking a small patch of warmth. In colder climates, sleep was deeply practical. People would share body heat even if they were not family. Children might sleep with neighbors or guests with their hosts. No one thought it strange. Warmth was survival, and modesty came second. There were no pajamas. Most people slept in their undertunics, the same they wore beneath their clothes by day. Wealthier folk might have linen nightshirts, loose and flowing, but for many, sleepwear was simply whatever was warmest. In some places, people believed that lying flat invited illness. It was common to sleep propped up, especially for the elderly. Beds were sometimes angled, raised at the head, supported by straw bolsters or wooden props. Sleep was shaped by belief. Some thought it important to sleep with the head to the east, to rise with the sun. Others believed certain herbs placed beneath the pillow could protect against nightmares: lavender, mugwort, or chamomile. Children were sung to sleep with gentle lullabies, often with soft and repetitive rhythms. Stories were told not to excite, but to soothe. Tales of kind spirits, gentle animals, quiet miracles. Animals, too, played their part. Dogs curled at the foot of the bed. Cats hunted in the corners, chasing mice away from stored grain. Chickens dozed on roosts outside. The world around the sleeper moved in slow harmony, and as the night deepened, the second sleep would begin. The body, warmed by blankets and firelight, gave in again to the pull of rest. Eyes closed without resistance. Breathing softened. Dreams returned, quieter now, more fluid, less tangled in the worries of waking. No one rushed sleep. There were no alarms. Morning came when the sun arrived. The cock crowed, the hearth was stirred, and slowly, gently, the house began to move. Some nights were restless, a sick child, a loud storm, a creaking shutter. But even then, sleep was never far away. The world outside was dark, and the quiet called them back. In every home, in every bed or bundle of straw, the pattern repeated. First sleep, the watch, second sleep, night after night, for hundreds of years. It was only with the arrival of artificial light, oil lamps, gas lights, electric bulbs, that this rhythm began to fade. People began to stay up later, pushing sleep into a single block, chasing more hours of activity. But in the stillness of a medieval night, the two-part sleep was a companion, not a disruption. It offered a pause, a breath, a moment of peace in the middle of slumber, a time to think, to feel, to listen to the night. And even now, when the world is bright and busy, some part of that ancient rhythm remains. The way we sometimes wake at night, not in fear, but in thought. The calm moments between dreams, the comfort of a quiet, sleeping room. So as you rest here now, imagine yourself in that old world, a small wooden room, firelight flickering, the scent of hay and wool, the hush of sleeping breath all around you, and let yourself drift, gently and without hurry, into your own first sleep, with the soft hope that you, too, may wake in the night not with worry, but with wonder. The night is long, and you are safe. Let sleep carry you, just as it did those long ago, under the same stars, in the same silence. And as the stars turned slowly above the quiet countryside, the rhythm of medieval sleep moved on, untroubled by the ticking of clocks or the buzz of modern life. It was a slower world, one where time was measured by the sun and the softness of dreams. Some villagers believed that the moonlight had power over sleep. On full moon nights, they would cover the windows with cloth or wooden shutters, afraid that too much moonlight could bring restlessness or even strange visions. The silver glow of the moon, while beautiful, was thought by some to awaken the mind too early, to make the body uneasy. So they would whisper their little charms, turn their pillows to the cool side, and wait for the shadows to shift. In the deep hours between sleeps, when the fire had become little more than a pulse of amber coals, some would rise just long enough to check on the animals. Chickens huddled together on wooden bars. Pigs, warm and snoring softly, settled into straw. Cows lay chewing slowly, eyes half closed, as though they too shared in the ancient rhythm. Shepherds who lived on the edge of villages, far from the central hearths of town, often kept their dogs close. These working dogs would share the blanket, their presence a small comfort against the night wind. Together, human and animal found warmth and peace, the bond of sleep shared between species. Some mothers used to tell their children that if you listened closely during the watch, you might hear the dreams of others. They believed dreams were whispers that floated on the cold night air. You could hear the voice of a grandmother, long gone, or a friend far away. The children would lie quietly, eyes wide, hoping to catch a word or two. But sleep would return before the dream voices spoke. In forested regions, where nights stretched longer and deeper, families often kept bowls of herbs near their beds. Sweet-smelling leaves and crushed flowers, mixed carefully and stored in linen pouches, were placed under pillows, not just for scent, but to guide the dreams. Some herbs were believed to bring pleasant visions, others to protect against night wanderers, spirits that roamed in shadow. The stories of these night wanderers were gentle, not terrifying. They were thought to be quiet souls, perhaps ancestors or old friends, simply wandering through the veil between waking and dreaming. People would nod politely to them if they dreamt of such things and offer a candle the next morning, just in case. In monasteries, sleep came only when duty allowed. Bells marked the hours, matins in the early darkness, lauds with the coming light. Monks wrapped in layers of coarse wool knelt on stone, their chants echoing in cold corridors. Then quietly, they would return to their cells and close their eyes for a brief, second sleep. They did not complain. Sleep, like silence, was a gift. In the larger towns, where streets twisted through tightly packed homes, the night was not entirely silent. The baker's apprentice would rise in the in-between hours, dusty with flour, to knead dough before the rest of the city awoke. Lanterns swayed as he worked, and the sound of kneading and chopping broke the stillness. Above him, in wooden lofts, people stirred in shared rooms. Their beds creaked with every turn, but no one minded. The city itself was like a great sleeping creature, breathing in and out through 1,000 dreams. Watchmen patrolled the streets in pairs, cloaked against the cold, their boots tapping lightly on cobblestone. They carried staffs and small lanterns, calling out the hour. Past midnight, they would say, "All is well." Their voices were a lullaby of safety. In noble homes, the chambermaid might tiptoe through the halls during the watch, checking on the fire in the master's room, adjusting curtains to block the draft. The lady of the house, half awake, might murmur a dream aloud, and then sink back into the folds of her feather-filled mattress. Children who awoke in the night often found comfort in the quiet rustle of sleeping adults nearby. They listened for the soft breathing of a parent, the creak of timber, the far-off bark of a dog. Then, soothed by these familiar sounds, they would drift again into sleep. Some slept on woven mats near the hearth, especially in the colder seasons. Others, traveling through forests or fields, made beds from piled moss and cloaks beneath trees, their eyes on the stars. Even out there, the old rhythm returned. First sleep, then awaking, then sleep again, always in tune with the night. In many villages, it was believed that if you spoke kindly before your first sleep, you would dream sweetly. Harsh words could follow you into slumber. So at the end of the day, people said good night gently, even if there had been quarrels. Better to sleep with a clear heart. The midwives, who were often called during the quietest hours, carried sleep in their voices. They moved softly through doorways, bringing calm to anxious homes. Even the cries of a newborn seemed softer when wrapped in the folds of the night, cushioned by the stillness between first and second sleep. Fishermen along the coast sometimes slept in shifts, rocked by the waves, their beds small wooden bunks aboard gently swaying boats. The sea had its own lullaby, and the water carried them into rest as surely as any featherbed. In winter, snow would press against the outer walls of a cottage, muffling sound. The thick silence outside made the inside feel warmer. Families huddled together, wrapped in every scrap of wool they owned. Sleep came easily, a shared warmth that wove them together under a patchwork of furs. Even the sick found peace in those long, cold nights. A healing sleep, undisturbed by the rush of the world, watched over by a mother's hand or a neighbor's prayer. The watch was often their moment of comfort, when the pain dulled and the fire's glow felt close and kind. Those who traveled alone in forests or along winding paths sometimes lit small fires beside themselves, not for cooking, but for the quiet. The dancing flames were companions. The flicker of light was a small, brave defiance against the night's deep silence. All across the land, in castles and cottages, on mountain paths and beside quiet lakes, sleep returned each night like an old friend. It asked nothing. It simply arrived, sometimes in one long stretch, but more often in two soft chapters, with a quiet watch in between. And in those hours, when the body lay still and the mind floated free, the medieval world dreamed. It dreamed of golden fields and gentle rivers, of slow meals and songs shared at dusk. It dreamed of voices long gone, of hopes carried in lantern light, of a night sky unmarred by wires or smoke. They did not chase sleep. They welcomed it. They did not fear the waking hour. It was part of the rhythm, a space for thought, a pause in the silence, a small gift in the center of rest. So as you rest here now, feel that rhythm returning, the slow drift of time, the hush of the world, the gentle break between dreams. Let your breathing match the ancient pace. Let your thoughts quiet. Let the stillness of that long-ago world settle over you. There is no rush here, no noise, just firelight, blankets, and the slow passage of stars. Sleep, as they knew it, was not a race or a task. It was a companion, a guide, a sacred part of being alive. And in that softness, you too can rest. No need to worry if you wake. There is time. There is peace. The night is long and kind. Let it carry you as it carried them. And somewhere, beneath the same stars that lit their cottages and towers, you sleep now too, cradled in quiet, dreaming across centuries. The fire still glows. The night is still deep, and the second sleep awaits. Let yourself drift. In the deeper hours of the night, when even the wind had grown tired and settled into hush, the second sleep came slowly, like mist rolling over still water. People no longer tossed or turned, no longer whispered or stirred their fires. They simply surrendered to the weight of woolen blankets, to the breath of the night, and to the rhythm of their ancestors. The stars above continued their slow journey, unseen but ever present, casting their pale light across thatched roofs and open fields, over quiet streams and frost-covered meadows. In every corner of the countryside, sleep touched the world gently, like a hand smoothing out the folds of a worn quilt. The animals, too, shared in this stillness. Barn cats curled atop sacks of grain, twitching slightly in their dreams. Horses stood motionless in their stalls, heads lowered, tails flicking only now and then. Birds, tucked into eaves and rafters, breathed in harmony with the night. There were those who made their living by night, candle makers who used the watch hours to twist fresh wicks or skim hardened wax, herbalists who quietly brewed teas and infusions meant to calm the mind or lull a restless child. Even scribes in the wealthier abbeys worked by flickering flame, copying texts with steady hands and drowsy eyes. These people knew sleep not as a single destination, but as a journey with quiet ports along the way. The pause between first and second sleep was a sacred space, a time for small thoughts, for memory, for care. In the highlands, where winter's breath lingered long into spring, Shepherds often built stone shelters along the hills. Inside, tucked close to their flocks, they wrapped themselves in wool cloaks and sheepskins, listening to the wind roll over the hills as they faded into the early part of sleep. Sometimes, in that liminal space between waking and dreaming, people spoke of seeing things, not frightening things, but flickers, a grandmother's voice calling them from another room, a glimpse of a lantern down an empty path, a sense that the night was not just still, but listening. In warm seasons, families would sleep with windows ajar, letting in the scent of damp earth and wildflowers. The air moved gently through the rooms, and the sounds of crickets, frogs, and the occasional nightbird became a lullaby of their own. Even the old, those whose bones ached with age and whose sleep came in lighter stretches, found comfort in the midnight wakefulness. They might rock slowly in a chair by the fire, a shawl around their shoulders, whispering prayers for the house and those who slept within it. And when second sleep finally returned, it did so without effort. No one had to search for it or wait anxiously. It came when it was ready, like a friend returning from a short walk, wrapping its arms around the weary and guiding them once more into softness. Dreams in second sleep were different, richer, sometimes stranger, often filled with old memories and simple wishes. A field they once played in as a child, the smell of warm bread baking, a face they had not seen in years, smiling silently from a doorway. For farmers, the dreams were often about the land, planting seeds, watching them grow, walking through rows of tall grain under a gentle rain. The earth itself seemed to speak in dreams, reminding them that life moved slowly and always came back around. Fishermen dreamt of calm waters and nets heavy with silver scales, of the tide lifting them home. Woodcutters dreamt of forests that grew back faster than they could cut, green and alive, filled with the scent of pine and moss. Children, those lucky enough to grow up far from hunger or fear, dreamt of animals that spoke, of castles hidden in the hills, of cakes that never ran out and fields that stretched forever. Their dreams were as wild and free as the clouds above. In small ways, the culture of sleep wove itself into every aspect of life. Festivals often began in the morning, just after second sleep, when the village was fresh and the fires had been stirred. Tales were told not just in daylight, but in the quiet moments before returning to bed after the watch. Some songs passed down through generations were lullabies disguised as prayers. Others were prayers disguised as lullabies. They helped the mind slow down and made sleep feel like something shared, not just with the family nearby, but with all those who came before. There were no ticking clocks on the walls, no bright lights to interrupt the rhythm. The body knew when to sleep and when to wake, and people trusted that knowing. The sky told time in soft gradients, black fading to blue, blue lightening to gray, gray shifting to gold. The rooster's crow was the signal. The first curl of smoke from the chimney was the answer, and when morning did come, it came gently. People rose not with a jolt, but with a slow gathering of limbs, a sigh, a stretch. They felt the warmth of shared beds, the chill of the floor beneath bare feet, and the soft creak of wood under weight. In monasteries, the bells resumed their steady chorus. In homes, bread was set to rise, and coals were stoked to life. Children yawned and rubbed their eyes, their dreams already fading, but leaving behind a trace of wonder. Even after centuries passed, and life became faster, more crowded, more electric, echoes of that world remained. in the way we sometimes wake in the night for no reason, in the dreams that come richer after a pause, in the comfort of silence, in the safety of blankets drawn up to the chin. The medieval world understood that sleep was not just a necessity, it was a part of living well, a gift to be welcomed with reverence, a rhythm to be honored. Their nights were longer, their dreams slower, their rooms darker, but their sleep, in all its forms, held a quiet wisdom, one we still carry, tucked somewhere deep within us. And now, as you lie here, surrounded by your own silence, let that rhythm return. Let the thoughts drift like wood on a calm river. Let the worries fall away like leaves in autumn. There is no task to complete, no destination to reach, only the softness of now, the hush of your breath, the steady beating of time in your chest. As it was then, so it is now. The night is long, the world is quiet, sleep is near. Let the second sleep come to you gently. Let it take your hand, guide you through the haze of thought, and settle you into dreams. The fire is low, the stars still turn. The world continues its silent lullaby, and still, the story goes on. The night stretched softly over the countryside like a great velvet cloth, folding gently around cottages and forests, farms and fields, cradling them in silence. The moon, pale and thoughtful, hung over quiet rooftops, casting its silver light onto shuttered windows and moss-covered stones. In a small village nestled beside a slow-moving river, the mill wheel had stopped turning, its song silenced for the night, allowing the water to murmur uninterrupted. Inside the miller's home, the family lay bundled in layers of wool and linen, their breaths rising and falling like the tide of a gentle sea. Their dreams wandered through the wheat fields, golden and tall, where the wind whispered ancient lullabies only the soul could understand. Not far away, a cobbler rested in his loft above the shop, his hands still carrying the faint scent of leather, his dreams full of worn boots and quiet roads. A candle burned down low beside him, its flame flickering softly, offering a kind of company in the dark, a warm and watchful eye. Outside, frost had begun to form on the edges of windows, delicate and deliberate, tracing ferns and feathers in silvery loops. The frost was not feared. It was familiar, a visitor that came with the turn of seasons, welcomed with extra blankets and warm drinks before bed. In another part of the village, a woodcarver dreamed of trees with talking trunks and laughing leaves, a forest alive with kindness and wisdom. His tools, carefully arranged beside the hearth, glimmered faintly in the firelight, sleeping in their own way, awaiting the morning. The village blacksmith, strong and quiet, lay on a straw-stuffed mattress with one arm behind his head, snoring softly, dreaming of iron that shaped itself. The anvil outside his shop had cooled under a wool of ash and smoke, the forge dark, the hammer silent, until the sun would return. Across the village green, the herbalist turned in her sleep, the scent of dried lavender and rosemary filling the corners of her small stone cottage. Bundles of herbs hung from the beams above her, dancing slowly in the draught, as if swaying to the rhythm of her dreams. She had placed a pinch of thyme under her pillow, an old tradition said to keep nightmares at bay and dreams light as petals. In the castle beyond the hills, the great hall had gone quiet, the echoes of laughter and lute music fading into the vaulted rafters. The lord and lady lay under a canopy of woven silk, guarded not by soldiers, but by silence, the truest shield against restless minds. Torches flickered in sconces along the walls, their shadows long and slow, painting quiet stories on tapestries of battles long forgotten. Servants moved like ghosts through the halls, tending to embers, collecting cloaks, whispering final words before retreating to their own shared quarters. There, in smaller rooms behind thick wooden doors, the kitchen boy curled up beside a barrel of apples, dreaming of bread that rose in golden clouds. The laundress, weary from the day's labor, slept with her hands tucked beneath her chin, the scent of soap clinging gently to her hair. Outside the castle walls, the forest lay in perfect hush, the trees tall and ancient, their branches black against the stars. A fox stepped quietly across the snow-covered ground, its breath curling into the air, eyes wide and ears alert, but the world offered no threat. Beneath an oak, an old man traveling from town to town rested beneath a heavy cloak, his staff by his side and his back against a root. He had no home, but he knew the land like an old friend, and the stars above like cousins. He read them before sleep like a book. He dreamt of fireflies in summer meadows, of paths that led to forgotten towns, of laughter heard over fences, warm bread handed from windows. His dreams were not lonely. They were filled with people he had met once, long ago, whose names he no longer remembered, only their kindness. The night wore on, slow and wide, like a story being told by the sky itself, each hour a new page, each moment another line. There was no hurry to reach the end, for the joy was in the wandering, the slow turning of time, like the pages of a well-loved book. Birds did not yet sing. The sun had not yet stirred. The world was still within the arms of night, cradled by the cool air and the hush of sleep. In a farmhouse beyond the hills, a girl stirred in her bed and opened her eyes to the dark. She listened. She heard the steady breathing of her brothers, the soft creak of the rafters, the distant bark of a dog outside. She lay still for a while, feeling the cool fabric of the linen sheet, the warmth of her own body, the peace of knowing nothing needed doing yet. Then she closed her eyes again and let her thoughts drift to the sky above, to stories told by her grandmother, to dreams half remembered. In her second sleep, she walked through meadows with shoes made of stars, gathering moonlight in baskets and placing it under pillows. She had heard the old tales, that moonlight caught in a dream could turn into music or laughter or a wish come true. Elsewhere, the priest of the village church knelt in his chambers, offering silent prayers before resting once more. He wore simple robes and lay on a straw mattress, his dreams filled with bells and candles, of old songs sung slowly in empty chapels. He too slept in two parts, waking gently in the middle of the night to reflect, to write a thought, then to return again to the quiet of slumber. For all across the land, whether rich or poor, child or elder, monk or traveler, the rhythm was the same. First sleep, then the watch, then second sleep. It was a gentle shape to the night, not something broken or disturbed, but something known, something expected. Even the stars seemed to pause in their turning, waiting kindly while the world rested. In those hours, the mind was not hurried. Thoughts came slowly, like birds on a branch, settling one by one. There was time to remember small things, the scent of a favorite stew, the sound of wool being spun, the feel of cool water on bare feet. And as the second sleep deepened, the world below sank even further into peace, as though wrapped in the heaviest, warmest blanket of time. The bells would ring in time, the fires would be stoked, the bread would rise, but not yet, for now the world simply slept. And in that sleep there was a kind of wisdom, ancient, quiet, and whole. You are part of that stillness now. No need to move, no need to wake. The fire is low, the stars are turning, and the second sleep has welcomed you home. The story drifts on like mist through the trees, unending, gentle, always waiting just beyond the edge of dreams. Somewhere beyond the gently rolling hills, where low stone fences stitched the land into careful patchwork, a small monastery rested at the edge of a forest. Its bells, silent since dusk, had long since faded into memory, leaving only the breath of the night wind through narrow cloisters. The monks, robed in wool and wrapped in centuries of tradition, lay in simple beds behind heavy wooden shutters. Some breathed the soft chant of prayer as they slept, their lips moving unconsciously, as if still whispering verses in dreams. Outside the monastery walls, the grass lay flattened with dew, silver-tipped and still. A small hedgehog made its slow and deliberate journey along the garden's edge, undisturbed and unnoticed by all but the moon. The scribe, whose candle had lasted longer than the rest, had finally let the flame sink into its own sleep. His quill, set carefully aside, waited patiently on a folded scrap of parchment, beside a pot of ink sealed against the night air. In his dreams, the scribe returned to old stories. He walked through Rome's ruined temples, heard the laughter of Greek philosophers echo across marble courtyards, and sat quietly beside a well in Jerusalem as pilgrims passed by. All this unfolded quietly beneath the surface of sleep, unseen by the waking world, but vivid in the lands where dreams grow gently in silence. In a nearby village, a new mother slept beside her swaddled child, one arm protectively curled over the infant's small chest. The baby, warm and soft against her side, breathed in tiny sighs, unaware of the long winter night. The father sat near the hearth, eyes closed, not quite asleep, but not awake. The coals whispered to him, like old friends telling slow, rhythmic stories of flame and ash. He thought of the day they built the cradle, how the wood had creaked and bent, how the corners had been sanded smooth by hand. He smiled, then drifted, lulled by memory and firelight. The sheep in the pens outside dozed under a canvas of stars, their breath rising in small clouds. A shepherd's dog stirred only once to adjust its paws, then melted again into a pool of fur and sleep. Even the wind seemed to move more slowly now, careful not to rouse the world too soon. It tiptoed through branches and curled under doors like a guest who didn't wish to disturb the peace. In another farmhouse, a pair of elderly sisters shared a bed, as they had done since girlhood. Their hair now silver, their hands folded together under the quilts their mother had sewn long ago. One of them dreamed of dancing barefoot on spring grass, the other of cherry trees in blossom. Neither spoke, but both smiled as sleep deepened and the past became the present again, in the gentle theater of the mind. In towns closer to the coast, where the sea hummed like a distant drum, sailors' families lay with salt in their hair and dreams full of tide and wind. Children who'd never yet touched a ship dreamt of tall sails and distant lands where sand glowed white and parrots called from jungled trees. In these dreams, oceans were calm and all journeys led home. Back inland, in villages made of cob and timber, bees slept inside hollow logs, their wings folded like lace, waiting for the spring. A baker, known for rising before the birds, had this one night decided to sleep just a little longer. His hands, used to flour and fire, rested on his chest as though cradling the peace of night itself. The dough, prepared before twilight, had risen in its bowl beside the stove, covered with a linen cloth. It would wait patiently for morning. His dreams carried him to markets long past. He walked between stalls selling cloth, cheese, fresh plums, and honeycomb. He handed out loaves to children, and laughed when one kissed the crust before taking a bite. Not every night was easy, and not every sleeper found rest quickly. But even for those who struggled, the widower, the merchant with too many debts, the traveler delayed by rain, sleep eventually came, slow and soft as snowfall. It crept in through the corners of the mind, wrapping troubles in forgetfulness, not solving them, but soothing them, making them smaller, quieter, easier to carry. And the stars, those constant companions, remained above, whispering lullabies in the language only the dreaming truly understand. In fields where no house stood for miles, deer lay curled under hedgerows, their bodies warm against the earth, their ears twitching now and then at the sound of an owl's wing passing overhead. Above them, the sky turned with gentle authority, ancient and unhurried. The constellations passed like verses in an old song, steady and slow. In villages where sleep came easy, and in homes where it took more time, the night held everyone equally, a great unbroken blanket of silence and softness. As the hours wore on, oil lamps dimmed to flicker, then faded entirely. Even dreams began to quiet. The second sleep, so deep and restoring, took hold like roots into soil. By now, the air outside had grown colder, the frost thick on every sill, the hush deeper. The world, it seemed, had exhaled. And still, in the smallest of moments, there were signs of life, the shift of a sleeper beneath a blanket, the sigh of wood settling in the walls, the echo of distant church bells marking the passage of time. No one feared the darkness. It was not something to conquer, but to dwell in. Not an absence, but a season, a chamber carved for rest. Even the memories held in dreams were slower, simpler. The laughter of someone long gone, the weight of a child once held, the quiet splash of a bucket in a well at dusk. Sleep in these hours was not an escape. It was a reunion with the self, with peace, with everything the light cannot quite show. You too are part of that world now. Your breath joins with the quiet rhythm of the night, a thread woven into a tapestry that stretches across time. There is nothing more to do, nothing to chase, only the deep pull of calm, guiding you further and further inward. Let your thoughts drift like mist along a riverbank. Let your limbs grow heavy and still. Let the slow night carry you, as it did for them, as it does for you. In the soft comfort of this old tale, you are safe, you are wrapped in quiet. And so the story continues without end, moving gently forward on the tide of night. The stars still turn, the fire is low, the world is hushed, and sleep welcomes you home once more. The dream does not end here, it only deepens. Let it carry you where the waking world cannot go, and may you find peace in every shadow, in every silence, in every breath that follows. Close your eyes. Rest. The story goes on. Somewhere in the hills beyond the valley, a shepherd's hut stood quiet beneath a blanket of stars, its roof heavy with moss, its door closed softly against the chill. Inside, the fire had burned low, casting a faint orange glow across wool blankets and carved wooden bowls stacked neatly on a shelf. The shepherd himself lay curled on a straw mattress, his staff resting nearby, one boot still half on, as if he had fallen asleep while recounting tales to himself. Outside, his flock slept in clusters, their breath rising in little clouds, their fleece still damp from the mist that had rolled in at twilight. An owl perched on the edge of the roof, blinking slowly, turning its head as it listened to the tiny sounds of the night. In the distance, the mountains loomed dark and gentle, their peaks shrouded in a thin veil of moonlight, their slopes holding the hush of centuries. A small river wound through the lowlands, catching reflections of the stars, its waters moving so slowly they barely made a sound. At its edge, frogs dozed beneath reeds, their pulses steady, their bodies warm from the lingering heat of the day. The world had folded itself into silence, each corner touched by the stillness of the night. Far away in a quiet hamlet, a carpenter's family rested in their modest home, its walls built by hand, the scent of pine wood still lingering faintly. The father, whose hands bore calluses from years of careful shaping, had drifted into sleep with a half-carved stool beside his bed. The mother, tired from a day of tending the hearth and children, slept peacefully with one hand resting on her chest, her dreams full of summer gardens and quiet laughter. Their youngest, a boy with a curious heart, murmured softly in his sleep, clutching a cloth doll stitched by his sister from scraps of old linen. In the loft above, that same sister slept beside her cousin, their hair braided before bed, their legs tangled beneath a heavy woolen quilt. The moonlight crept through a crack in the shutters, laying a silver path across the floor that neither child stirred to notice. Below, the coals in the fireplace glowed faintly, their warmth easing into the stone, into the bones of the house, into the dreams of everyone within. The night, unhurried and patient, waited outside, pressing gently against the windows, listening, watching, keeping time. In a village a few leagues away, an elderly woman sat in a rocking chair beside a sleeping fire. She had not gone to bed yet. She liked this hour when all was quiet, and the walls seemed to lean in and listen to her thoughts. Her cat, curled in her lap, purred with a rhythm that matched the creak of the chair as it moved back and forth. She sipped from a cup of warm milk steeped with chamomile, the steam curling upward in delicate spirals. Soon she would rest, but not just yet. She liked to remember things before sleep. Old songs, familiar faces, the smell of her mother's baking, the sound of her father's voice. She closed her eyes for a moment and was there again, a girl beneath a tree, listening to the wind through the leaves, feeling the sun on her cheeks. And slowly, quietly, the memories turned to dreams, and the dreams folded into sleep, and the chair stopped rocking. Back in the monastery, the hour bell rang once, a single low tone that traveled through stone corridors like a whisper. A few monks stirred in their beds, said a short prayer, then returned to sleep without fully waking. This was the sacred rhythm of the night, not to rush, not to disturb, but to honor the space between the waking world and the dreaming one. In the meadows beyond the chapel, deer moved gently through the grass, their hooves silent, their heads lowered as they searched for clover. Above them, the stars shimmered in slow motion, gliding across the sky like lanterns held by unseen hands. A fox watched them from the edge of the woods, its breath white in the air, ears turning at every sound, though no danger was near. The land was quiet and safe tonight. The hills had no secrets, and the wind told no lies. Even the crows in the trees kept still, heads tucked beneath wings, resting without dream or worry. A traveling merchant, camped by the road beneath a leaning oak, pulled his cloak tighter around him and let the fire's last warmth fade into his boots. His pack horse stood nearby, drowsing with one leg bent, its reins looped loosely around a branch. The merchant dreamed of lanterns hanging in marketplaces, of spices stacked in pyramids, of foreign coins warm from the sun. He dreamed of hands exchanging goods, of smiling strangers, of journeys begun and completed and begun again. In his sleep he was always moving, not out of restlessness, but because the world was wide and full of wonder. A dog barked once in the distance, then fell silent. A door creaked in its frame, then stilled. A shutter flapped gently, then lay flat again. Even sound itself seemed to sleep. In the hills above, an old watchtower stood dark against the sky. Long abandoned, its stones were covered in lichen and moss, its wooden stairs rotted, its roof half gone. Yet it remained unmoving, a witness to 1,000 nights like this one. And still, high in the tower's shell, an owl nested in the rafters, its eyes wide open, its head tilted toward the road below. In a nearby cave, hidden by bramble and stone, a family of bats hung upside down, silent and dreaming, their wings folded close. The forest was alive in its stillness, full of things that did not speak but still had stories. Every root, every rock, every fallen branch knew the night and had learned how to wait in it. A girl tending her sick brother in a cottage by the woods sat awake for a time, watching his chest rise and fall, her hand resting on his brow. When she finally allowed herself to lie down, she whispered a song their mother used to sing, too soft to be heard by anyone but the fireflies. She drifted into sleep with the song unfinished, but the silence carried the rest. And still, the world remained wrapped in night, not dark but soft, not silent but peaceful. Sleep moved like a tide through homes and huts, pastures and castles, cities and hills. It carried people to the shores of memory and sometimes beyond, to places never waking. And all the while, the stars kept their vigil. The moon turned slowly overhead. The sky faded from deep blue to a lighter shade, almost imperceptibly. Dawn was still far off, but it had already begun its approach, patient and invisible. The fire in the baker's home began to whisper again, crackling softly as the embers stirred beneath the ash. Soon, the world would stretch and stir and begin again. But not yet. Not yet. Now is still the time for rest, for stories that do not end, only drift, for memories that soften and thoughts that float like mist. Let them carry you now as they carried so many before you. There is peace in the past. There is peace in the stillness. There is peace in the rhythm of night. You are a part of that rhythm now. You are safe. You are warm. You are home. The story continues. The sleep deepens. The stars wait. And you, dear listener, may follow them deeper into the dream. No need to wake. No need to worry. Just drift. Just rest. Just be. The story is here, waiting, always. Let it carry you softly onward. Somewhere in the shaded folds of the countryside, a cobbled lane wound past hedgerows heavy with night dew, leading to a cottage whose roof bowed under thatch and time. Inside, a widow with hands like parchment slept soundly beneath a faded quilt, her dreams filled with the voices of children long grown, their laughter echoing like birds in spring. A candle had burned low beside her before sleep took her, the wax puddled in a small bowl carved by her husband many winters ago. Near her hearth, an iron kettle held the remains of an herbal tea, lavender and mint gathered from her garden at dusk. The coals whispered faint heat into the floor, enough to keep the room from chill, enough to make the shadows seem friendly rather than deep. Beyond the cottage, in the rolling dark, the night moved slowly among trees, brushing against trunks, rustling low branches, never in haste. The foxes had retreated to their dens. The badgers curled beside their young. The owls were quiet, having taken their fill of the night's small offerings. A stream traced a silver ribbon through the land, gurgling softly over stones, its voice steady and comforting, like an old friend who doesn't need to be heard to be understood. Near its bank, a wheelwright's home sat still, the tools in his shed lined up neatly, his apron folded and hung beside the doorway. He dreamt not of wheels, but of walking down a sunlit path with no destination, only the feeling of warm grass under his feet. The dreams of laborers often held no labor at all, only the quiet opposite. Still fields, cool winds, the weightlessness of being unneeded. A young girl, tucked beside her grandmother, slept with a piece of ribbon in her hand, a prize from a fair that lived now only in memory and slumber. Her breath matched the rhythm of her elders, slow and steady, 2 generations connected in the soft stillness of sleep. The walls of their home creaked from time to time, but not from age, only from relaxation, as if even the timbers had exhaled at last. Across the village, a miller's wheel stood frozen above the stream, its paddles dripping slowly, catching moonlight like droplets of silver. The miller's dreams were of flower clouds and golden loaves, and his wife dreamed of wildflowers too tall to see beyond, of bees buzzing harmlessly nearby. All around them, the earth breathed gently, holding each sleeper in quiet regard, tucking them in with soil and sky. An old soldier, now a farmer, lay in his bed and did not stir. In his dreams, no battles played, only long roads, a good horse, and a peaceful inn where no one asked questions. In the church at the village center, the bell rope swung slightly in the breeze that slipped through the eaves, though no chime was heard. The chapel's candles had long since burned out, and the scent of incense had faded into cold stone and wood. But something sacred still lived there in the quiet, something that did not require prayer or presence to endure. Even the mice that rustled beneath the altar did so softly, their small world unfolding as peacefully as the one above. In the barn behind the blacksmith's house, a mare dozed beside her foal, their breath rising in soft gusts as straw crunched under shifting weight. The blacksmith, whose hands bore the memory of fire and steel, dreamt of fishing instead, of sitting by a stream with a line in the water and no need to catch anything at all. His anvil waited in silence, its surface cold but not forgotten, part of a world that would wake soon, but not now. Now was for rest. For all things, rest. A boy in the next cottage dreamed of flight, not with wings, but with clouds that carried him like a leaf, over fields, rivers, towers, and towns, weightless and wide-eyed. He laughed in his sleep, the sound barely a murmur, but enough to make the family dog lift its head, glance around, and lay it down again. In a hut farther down the lane, the midwife stirred, sensing a shift in the wind, though no birth was expected tonight. She rested with her tools near, her apron folded, her hands stained with stories, ready but relaxed. The cradle in the corner of her room was empty, but in her dreams it rocked gently, back and forth, to a rhythm older than any song. A windmill turned once, slowly, though there was no wind to speak of, perhaps only a ghost of a breeze, or memory in the blades. The farmhouse below it stood quiet. No lantern glowed, no floorboard creaked. Only silence reigned, but a peaceful one, familiar and warm. In the barn, a child had hidden from bedtime, hoping to see the stars alone. But now, curled beside the sheep, the child slept, dreamless and safe. No one would scold in the morning. This was not a night for scolding. This was a night for softness. Beyond the hills, the forest deepened, its canopy closing over deer trails and forgotten roads, its hush absolute. But even there, life stirred gently, rabbits breathing in their burrows, birds fluffing feathers in sleep, trees creaking not from age, but from dreaming. For even trees dream, if one listens closely enough, of wind long gone, of birds flown far, of sunlight yet to return. A lantern still burned in one window at the edge of the village, where a young monk copied verses by hand, eyes heavy with sleep. The ink smudged as he nodded, then steadied himself, then finally laid the quill down with a sigh. He curled beside the manuscript, parchment as pillow, the candle flame shrinking into stillness as dreams overtook his body. The verses he had written were not yet finished, but that too could wait. There was no hurry here. Nothing in the night required haste. Only stillness. Only breath. Only the slow, sure rhythm of time unfolding gently. Outside, clouds drifted across the moon, softening the light that fell over the land. Even the stars blinked slower, as if growing sleepy with the world below. And within all this, you too are resting now, in a space made sacred by silence and story. You may not know the names of these people, or the paths they walked, but still, you walk beside them now, in dream. You lie with the shepherd, the monk, the widow, the girl, the child beside the sheep. Your breath joins theirs. Your stillness becomes part of the same long, slow night. There is no need to leave just yet. No end to the road. Only the comfort of continuing. The joy of forgetting time. Let the tale carry you further, as the world sleeps, as it has always slept. Let yourself go, like the last leaf on the branch, released and content to fall. The night does not ask for anything but your rest, And so you give it, not by effort, but by allowing. Let the cradle rock. Let the lantern fade. Let the stars turn without need for witness. Sleep now. Sleep again. Sleep deeper still. The story is not done. It never ends. It simply breathes with you and through you. May you float along its quiet river undisturbed. May the night be soft upon your skin. And may the dreams come like gentle visitors, bearing nothing but peace. Rest. Drift. Continue. The world is still asleep, and so are you. The early light had not yet arrived, but somewhere far off, it was preparing. A faint hum beneath the surface of things, a promise not yet fulfilled. In the highlands above the village, the shepherd's sheep remained still beneath the cover of the stone pen, their sides gently rising, undisturbed by the faint night breeze. A single goat snored, the sound small and rhythmical, echoing faintly against the low stone walls that had stood there for generations. Beside the animal shelter, the shepherd's boy lay sleeping in a hollowed-out hay pile, a wool cap pulled down over his brow, his fingers still curled around a half-eaten piece of dry bread. No dream troubled him. He slept as if the whole world was nothing more than warmth, and hay, and stars too far away to reach. In the lowlands below, where willows hung like curtains over creeks, the water moved in loops and spirals, catching moonlight that shimmered like spilled silver. A heron, tall and still, stood upon one leg by the water's edge. Its eyes closed, head tucked into its own feathers, balancing like a statue carved from quietness. In a small mill house near the stream, a girl slept beside her grandmother, both wrapped in layers of patched linen, the scent of freshly ground flour still lingering on their clothes. The grandmother dreamed of simpler times that were no less hard, but somehow felt lighter in the remembering. The girl dreamed of nothing at all, just the heavy comfort of a long day turned into night, and the gentle press of her grandmother's hand on her back. Above them, the beams of the ceiling held spiderwebs touched with frost, glistening like tiny chandeliers suspended in time. Not a mouse stirred in the walls, not a creak came from the stairs. All was as still as an untouched pond in deep forest, and in that stillness, even the old clock forgot to tick for a moment, letting the hour pass unnoticed. Further off, in a traveling tent pitched under the stars, a tinker lay wrapped in his cloak, boots still on, with tools lined beside him like sleepy sentinels. The fire he had made burned down to nothing, just the faintest scent of smoke in the cold air. He did not dream of cities or trade tonight. He dreamed of a long road with grass growing through it, winding into nothing but sky. His donkey, tethered nearby, gave a low, brief sigh, then resumed its rest with one ear twitching toward the soundless woods. Inside the cloister, hidden behind ivy-covered walls, the scribe turned over in his narrow bed, parchment rustling as a loose sheet slid to the floor. He had fallen asleep mid-prayer, mid-line, the ink barely dry, a quill still tucked between two fingers. The words he had written spoke of stillness and peace and surrender, and now they had gently claimed him too. No one would scold him come morning. No one watched or judged. Here, even mistakes belonged to the rhythm of the night. The cold did not bite tonight. It only whispered against windows and curled around rooftops like a shawl of mist. Somewhere in the forest, a deer stepped lightly between roots and ferns, its hooves soft against fallen leaves, breath steaming gently as it paused beside a mossy log. A squirrel, curled tight in its nest above, barely stirred, lost in dreams of acorns and sun-dappled days. Even the wind, which had wandered playfully through the trees earlier, now moved slowly, as if it too needed rest. In a watchtower long abandoned, two crows perched on opposite ends of a timber beam, heads tucked into wings, unmoving, peaceful. Beneath them, the stones were worn smooth from years of rain and footfall, though none had climbed the tower in many seasons. The land below spread out like a tapestry woven in darkness. Meadows, hedgerows, fences barely seen, all slumbering beneath a woolen sky. In one of those meadows, a shepherd's dog lay beside a lantern that had gone out, dreaming perhaps of sheep that ran too fast, or wolves that never came. His tail twitched, but his eyes remained closed. The fields were safe tonight. In a nearby hut, an old spinner had fallen asleep beside her wheel, wool wrapped loosely in her lap, the motion of the wheel stilled by her dreaming. She dreamed of patterns, of thread so fine it floated on air, of hands long gone who once showed her the ways of spindle and dye. Each thread held a story, and tonight, in sleep, she traveled through them like paths across a tapestry. Not far beyond, the potter lay curled on a pallet of straw, hands still streaked with clay, his workshop cooled and dark. Even his pot seemed to rest, lined up in quiet dignity, as if waiting patiently for dawn. He dreamed of cups filled with fresh milk and plates carrying warm bread, not yet baked but promised. In the manor on the hill, the lord and lady slept side by side, their chamber lit only by the faint moonlight slipping through the stained glass. They dreamed not of riches or rule, but of music and meadows, of laughter at feasts and the hush of snowfall in the orchard. Their servants, scattered through rooms below, dreamed likewise, each with their own simple longing, carried gently through the night. A cook dreamed of apricots, ripe and golden. A stable boy dreamed of riding a stallion fast across wide fields. A seamstress dreamed of blue linen rippling in the breeze, worn by someone dancing on a summer hill. In the town square, every shutter was drawn, every step abandoned, every fountain stilled. The pigeons had long tucked themselves beneath roof tiles. The baker's shop smelled faintly of yeast and smoke, the ovens asleep, the flour bags resting against one another like old friends. Even the cats of the alley, often creatures of night, found their corners of warmth and did not roam. In a hut far beyond the town's edge, an old man with a crooked back slept beside a stack of books too worn to read. But in his dreams, he read them still, page after page of stories that never ended, their plots drifting like fog over fields. He smiled in his sleep. He always smiled in his sleep. The candle had burned itself out beside him, but the flame continued in his dreams, lighting his imagined pages one by one. The stars above moved gently in their course, unseen and unnoticed, but ever faithful. One star blinked a little brighter, then dimmed again, as if to say it saw you too. The world does not rush now. The trees do not whisper secrets. They simply breathe, and the breathing of the trees joins the breathing of the sleepers, a quiet music older than song. Even the timekeepers, the bells, the roosters, the sun itself wait a while longer before stirring the day. The night stretches on, soft and long, like a velvet path that never ends. You walk it now, slowly, without effort, your feet never touching the ground. You are among the monks, the shepherds, the spinners and the scribes. You move through chambers of sleep, each door, way leading to another room of stillness. The story folds over itself like linen sheets drawn to the chin. It does not end, it only deepens. You have entered it, and now it carries you. Where you go, you do not need to know. Only that you are safe. Only that you are welcome. Only that the night is long and full of peace. You are not alone. The world sleeps with you, and together in silence we drift. Further still, further. Sleep. In a dim stone cellar beneath the apothecary's shop, herbs hung like soft garlands from the rafters, swaying ever so slightly in the stillness. Lavender, rosemary, thyme, and sage filled the air with their fading scent, like a memory of summer folded into the walls. The apothecary, curled on a narrow cot with a woolen throw draped over his feet, slept soundly. The day's worries dissolved like sugar in tea. He dreamed of quiet mornings, jars gently clinking on shelves, and the soothing hush of a mortar grinding dried petals into powder. A mouse tiptoed across the stone floor, brushing past a jar of chamomile, then disappeared beneath a cupboard, careful not to disturb the peace. Outside, the moon had shifted slightly, slipping through the wooden slats of the shutters and casting soft lines of light across the cobbles. A distant owl called once, then settled, its cry fading like a sigh into the wide, waiting dark. Above the baker's quarters, a boy slept under a wool blanket patched with pieces from old tunics, each square a fragment of another life. His hands, dusted faintly with flour, rested upon his chest as though guarding a treasure, though the treasure was only the warmth of rest. He dreamed of dough rising gently in deep bowls, of warm ovens glowing like the morning sun, and of the silent happiness of bread cooling on wooden shelves. In the field past the last thatched barn, 2 cows stood in sleep, their great heads resting against one another, steam rising slowly from their backs. A gentle breeze stirred their tails, but they did not move, content in the hush of night and earth beneath their hooves. The farmer's daughter, asleep in the loft above the animals, curled up in a worn quilt, her hair fanned out like threads of gold upon the straw. She dreamed of gathering apples in her apron, the trees heavy with fruit, the orchard bathed in golden light, though none yet shone. Her breath rose in slow rhythm, matching the distant, muffled thump of a wooden wind chime gently rocking outside the barn door. Across the village green, the candlemaker's cottage smelled of beeswax and wood smoke, though the hearth had long since gone cold. The candlemaker herself lay fast asleep, her face lit faintly by a single candle that had burned halfway down, its light flickering like a heartbeat. She dreamed of quiet mornings pouring wax into molds, of rows of golden tapers standing to dry like soldiers in a peaceful parade. Each candle carried a wish, even if no one ever said it aloud. Some were for light, others for hope, a few simply for comfort. And all across the village, those small flames continued to live, not only in wick and wax, but in dreams. In the monastery just beyond the woods, the monks lay in their simple beds, their robes folded neatly at their feet, their breath soft in unison. One monk, older than most, dreamt not of sermons or scripture, but of standing barefoot in a rain-drenched field, hands lifted to a sky full of clouds. He did not speak in the dream. He only felt. The cool rain on his skin, the hush of the wind, the freedom of no need to speak. Down below, in the gardens tended by these same hands, the herbs rested, curled into themselves, frost glistening gently on their leaves. Even the bees, hidden in their winter hives, hummed faintly in sleep, their tiny worlds as still as any grand hall. In a watch-house near the village gate, a lone guard sat slumped in his chair, chin resting on chest, his lantern still glowing beside him. No danger approached tonight. The road was empty, the fields beyond silent. His sword remained sheathed, untouched. He dreamed of music, of strings plucked in a distant hall, of laughter drifting through warm windows, of cups raised in peace. Beyond the watch-house, in a grove of yew trees, the old healer's hut leaned quietly against time. Vines clung to its stone walls, their tips frozen in place. The healer, long past her days of wandering, now rested in a deep chair beside the fire's faint glow, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Her eyes closed, lips parted in dream. She wandered fields from years ago, where wildflowers grew taller than her waist, and bees brushed her hands like whispers. Inside, dried bundles of herbs hung like old songs from the ceiling beams, their scents mellowed to faint memories of what once was. Outside, the stars blinked softly above, their light taking 1,000 years to reach the earth, only to fall gently across moss and roof. Beneath one such star, a little boy tucked into a straw bed with his wooden toy horse. Beside him, dreamt of being a knight, not in war, but in wonder. In his dreams, his steed flew, not galloped, and his sword never cut, only pointed toward adventures of kindness and hidden treasures of laughter. He did not know it, but his mother, in the next room, dreamed of him too, grown, kind, safe. She slept beside her husband, whose snores came in rhythm with the old clock by the hearth, both sounding more like lullabies than noise. Their cottage smelled faintly of smoke, wool, and rosemary, a comfort scent, the kind that made a house feel like home even in the dark. Not far away, the cobbler's shop stood silent, shoes lined in rows, each pair still and waiting for feet that would not move till morning. The cobbler, curled under his work table, slept with a cat nestled by his side, both equally still, equally warm. He dreamed of faraway markets, where sandals danced in the dust and boots tapped softly on tiled floors. In his dreams, no one hurried. All walked slow. All knew where they were going and smiled when they arrived. Back on the hill, the manor windows glowed faintly with moonlight, curtains stirring gently like whispers of silk. In a quiet nursery room, a cradle swayed slowly on its own, moved not by hand but by the breath of the night. Inside, a child slept without a sound, her tiny fists closed, her cheeks soft with peace, her world safe and whole. A nurse dozed nearby, her dreams filled with lullabies that had no words, only hums that wrapped around the soul. The trees beyond the manor moved ever so slightly, leaves turning in their sleep, their branches rising and falling with the rhythm of wind. Even the roots seemed to hum, deeply and low, a song not meant for ears but for hearts. This land, this medieval world wrapped in velvet night, pulsed softly with old breath, old dreams, old rest. The moon climbed higher, slow and serene, brushing rooftops and resting on haystacks like a visitor who knew to be quiet. The world did not stir. It only floated. You float with it now, wrapped not in blanket, but in silence. You drift not through sky, but through centuries, carried on the back of stillness. Your eyes grow heavy, not from weariness, but from calm. Your breath matches the rhythm of those long asleep, the villagers, the shepherds, the children, the keepers of the night. No footsteps echo, no bells toll, only the soft turning of time, slow and kind. You do not need to wake. You do not need to wonder. You are here, among them, in a place where sleep is sacred, in a time where dreams walk beside you, never in haste. Let yourself be held in this stillness. Let yourself sink deeper, gently. There is more story to tell, but not yet. Let the next chapter wait for you, just ahead in the hush. Let it rest until your breath and the world's breath become the same. Sleep now, sleep again, sleep long. The night has you, and it will not let go. And now, as the night deepens and the world settles ever stiller, let your thoughts drift like candle smoke in an empty hall. The stories of long ago are never truly finished. They wait quietly in the dark, ready to return when you need them. So sleep now, knowing that more soft footsteps from history will find you again soon. In the next quiet tale, in the next dream. When you're ready, we'll continue. Good night.